So things like understand the difference between statistically significant and how that's different from practically significant. Now, some of the questions on your review don't have answers because I want you to actually look it up in your notes and stuff like that. Your notes is also a good place to study for the exam. What's the difference between a statistic and a parameter? So these bulleted items are definitely things to look at. Some of the other things, I thought of a couple of these that got left off of your handout. Percentile. You should know the difference between the 90th percentile and the 10th percentile. Which one do you want to be in if this is your score on your test? Do you want to be in the 90th percentile or the 10th percentile? I'd want to be in the 90th. That means you're at the top as opposed to the bottom. Z-scores. You should be able to calculate a Z-score. In fact, for the test, the most you're going to need is a calculator. You will not be doing any Google Sheet work on this test, so you don't have to worry about having your computer here.
So we're not like calculating like a lot of means, medians, modes, and all that?
No, but you should be able to interpret that. You should be able to tell me, for instance, what's the advantage of using the mean, the arithmetic mean? What's the disadvantage? What's the advantage of using the harmonic mean? What's the disadvantage? Those kind of things. They give you a handout on that stuff. Z-score. Here's kind of a clever one that I thought of this morning. Suppose I asked you to calculate the Z-score for today's weather, the temperature. Is it going to be positive, negative, or 0? And then ask you to justify your answer. Now, you could give me any one of 3 answers, positive, negative, or 0, just as long as you justify it properly. What's the difference? Well, if it's negative, what's that saying about today's temperature compared to the average temperature?
It's lower.
It's lower. It's below it. That's what would give you a negative in the numerator. If today's temperature is bigger than the mean, then it'd be positive Z-score. What will give you a 0 in the Z-score? If they're the same. If today's temperature is, it's right about at the average temperature. You have the standard deviations. What is the standard deviation tell you? There's 2 things I'm looking for. What's the standard deviation tell you? This is a big one. Yeah, don't miss this on the first test or on the final exam. Standard deviation tells you what, Nate?
How far away something is from the mean.
Let me generalize that a little bit. How far out on average your data is spread from the mean. Because it's not just looking at one value, it's looking at the whole data set, comparing the whole data set to the mean and saying, all right, well, how far spread out it is. Now that's one characteristic of things that I want you to know. The other characteristic is, well, what makes the standard deviation bigger? What makes it smaller? What's the smallest that it can get? What's the smallest standard deviation can get? 0. Yeah, absolutely. 0 is the smallest you can get. And that would happen if all your data was the same, meaning there's no spread to your data. Bigger standard deviations mean there's more spread to your data. I've mentioned this briefly, but I like using the term mutually exclusive. The book uses disjoint. Either way, this means that 2 events can't happen at the same time. Here's a reminder that you will need to know some things about standard deviation. I'm not going to be asking you to do a lot of stuff with calculations, but if I did give you, a 5-number summary, you should be able to interpret that. That's your box and whisker plot. Maybe I gave you those. You could draw me a box and whisker plot or interpret a box and whisker plot. So you should know that there's the min, Q1, Q2, Q3, and then the max. That kind of thing. Maybe a quick problem on odds. I like odds. Again, I can't test you on everything that I'd like. The test is probably going to be somewhere between 15 and 25 problems. And there's not going to be much in the way of calculation. So if you have just a standard calculator, I'm not going to be letting you use your phone. You should be okay. Here's some work with percentages. That's just basically arithmetic. I'm hoping you can do that. So take a look at the handout and see what you can do. If you have some questions, we'll look them up. Some of the answers are there, some of them aren't. So good luck and see ya.
After the exam, are we doing any?
One sec. No, after the exam, we'll be done.